Gaps and Goose, welcome to the long-awaited, long-anticipated, never ever in a million trillion years was ever going to happen again, except it always was, because I always intended for it to happen. Welcome to another Live Fuka commentary, where today I wanted to talk about a specific subject, mostly because I feel like it's very topical at the moment, and I wanted to load up kind of the poster child for, I think, the precipice of this conversation that I'm going to be having, which is ultimately the Nintendo Doomer slash Gloomer pipeline, which has been super fresh in my mind lately. I recently started streaming again, which, if you're coming from the streams, I really appreciate that. If you're here on YouTube, go check out my streams. Twitch.tv/LiveFuka. But that's neither here nor there. I'm only really bringing that up because I've brought that up so many times now on stream that I feel almost... I feel like at liberty is not the right word to use, but I feel almost like I have the due diligence to come out and just talk about this console for a little bit. I feel like the general rhetoric around Switch 2 right now is just that it's an overpriced kind of paperweight. I don't agree with that sentiment at all. In fact, I quite love this console to death. I think it's very quickly shooting up my ladder of just favorite pieces of hardware that I've ever used. And I don't use that in any dramatic fashion, in any hyperbole. I genuinely feel that way towards the system, which I think is being maybe misridiculed online. There was a fantastic video that Matthew's GameCube had put out about just the general state of Nintendo YouTubers and discussion around these products, that I felt almost compelled in the middle of the night to start yapping about this. Mostly, again, I don't ever want to come in these videos like a just blind bootlicker for this billion-dollar company, because that's also not it. I am very quick to point out just the idiocracies that Nintendo has just pushed to the masses, especially during this generation, which I think has always kind of existed in the Nintendo mythos. For example, I mean, everyone was... Let me put it this way. So when the Wii came out and it was a money printer, I feel like their business practices, maybe because we were younger, and at least in my case scenario, I was younger and didn't really notice the big business practices side of Nintendo quite as much as I do now as an adult who has the funds to buy my own video games, which is primarily what I do, right? I buy all the games that I have myself, and typically I look at it from a cost point of view, where not only am I going to get a lot out of the console, because I've been using my Switch 2 every day. I have pretty much since launch, since June 5th. I picked up my console on my birthday, and I've been playing the shit out of it ever since. I feel like the conversations around this specific console are not necessarily if it's a good piece of hardware or not, but if it's even worth it for some folks, which, again, is completely fine. People spend the money, or spend their money how they see fit. In this case scenario, I'm only bringing that up because I feel like the general consensus around Switch 2, again, is that it is overpriced, which I have some feelings about. I feel like $450 an entry point is so much more affordable than what the new consoles are doing. And I say new because they are the modern gen pieces of hardware, but if you're not in the know, those have recently gotten a price increase, which is quite ridiculous. Paying almost $1,000 for a PS5 Pro with no disc drive, in my opinion, is just that's too much. And I think now more than ever, especially Nintendo fans, are just far too worried about the business practices of $1 billion company. And again, I preface this, they make a shit ton of money already. anytime I look up any type of content about the Switch 2, it seems to be a, a needless mix of the same 4 types of videos, where I won't name specific names because I don't even really want to give them the platform. It's just blind Nintendo doomers that, without reason, for every, like, at least once a week or once every other couple set of days, it's a new headline that the Switch 2 is failing, in that it's not worth your time, which, again, people will justify the their purchases as much as they can, but again, I'm looking at this from a perspective of an outsider looking in. I've been doing content for a little bit now, so I can kind of look at it from a content creator's perspective, in the sense of people constantly needing to fight for new pieces of info. But that also brings me to my next point, which is just like, why does there need to be a constant influx of new news about this console, which already has such fantastic games, whether it be first party, third party? Like, the console's not even been out for a full calendar year yet, and the blind expectations that not even just Nintendo fans, but I guess the wider gaming industry is holding on the Switch 2 shoulders, I think is unjust, in the sense that I feel like a lot of those expectations that people are blindly putting onto this console are not going to be met, and it's going to ruffle people's feathers the wrong way. And I don't think that that's fair towards the product, and I don't think that it's fair towards the hardware itself, because again, it's fantastic hardware. I can go to my home screen now, where just a couple examples of the types of things that I've been playing on this console. Again, first party stuff, also a lot of third party stuff. There is so much stuff to play on Switch 2 that when I see Nintendo YouTubers talk about there's no big game for Switch 2, there's no big push for Switch 2, I'm constantly dumbfounded at the idea that people don't think that there's stuff to play on this console. And again, I know I'm playing Pokemon Fire Red, which is, I think, bad business practice number 1, and I'm no better because I am still making those purchases. But at the same time, I look at it from a perspective of someone who is very open about my game borrowing tendencies, which I'll put a little flash on screen. But at the same time, I am also someone who very much will go back and pay for a product that I have used that type of way, if I deem it, worth my time and worth the publisher's time. Obviously, I could have just borrowed these games, but when you look at it from my perspective, which is that I could go out and just buy an official cartridge, which will run me about $150 plus, that can vary depending on the seller and the condition. I could also just buy a $20 ROM and have it permanently etched into my Switch library. So that, I know, is give and take. Maybe I'm just the blind consumer that's buying anything that Nintendo's putting out. But at the same time, I didn't buy Pokemon Pokopia. I've seen how gigantic of a fad it's been, and it's taken the world by storm. I've actually seen people go out of their way to buy a Switch 2 just for that game, which again, it just confuses me even more, because people are saying that there are no games on Switch. There's no reason to go ahead and pull one out, which is totally fine. If there is still no games out for you right now on Switch 2 that aren't out on any other platform, I'm not going to go out and say that you're dumb because you're not purchasing the system. If anything, I would say maybe try and get in before the prices increase, but I think that's just more of a case scenario of things being bad in the world right now, not necessarily that the fact that you're going to be missing out on Pokemon Winds and Waves in 2026. But I don't know, the topics around this console are just so unfair. Whether it having quote-unquote no games, whether it having not a big enough library, which again, sub year 1, this console's not been out for a full year. But it's also just, I think the negativity around people that do like this console. Again, like I said, I don't want to come at this from a perspective of a Nintendo bootlicker, because I've poured money into this console. I'm gonna be, ridiculed, and I'm going to be given the finger, essentially saying that I am part of the problem, which I recognize to some degree. But at the same time, like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Just blindly talking shit about a console, but at the same time, seeing another channel on YouTube just be blindly supportive of it and be scared to criticize the console. This thing is not perfect. It doesn't run games like the best ever. Obviously, it still runs them well enough, and you can enjoy what you're doing, but it's fundamentally still held back some, you know. Definitely playing a game on Switch 2 could be comparable to a PC or excuse me, to a Steam Deck or PS5, but it's still not a fully capable home console. You know, it's still meant to be taken on the go, which I think people are also not recognizing. This thing packs quite a punch for being able to be about the thickness of your fucking fingernail, which is something that I keep going back to all the time because it genuinely trips me out. Being a kid who grew up with a Game Boy SP, you know, playing this game, I never thought in a million trillion years that I'd be able to play Final Fantasy Remake Intergrade on the same console that I'm playing Pokemon Fire Red on. But again, I feel like I can't say too many nice things about the Switch 2 without being ridiculed or getting made fun of because I enjoy your product. And again, people can say it's overpriced. People can say that the entry to go ahead and jump into this console is far too much. But when you look at it from the perspective of all the other consoles that are out on the market right now and where the current climate of the economy is, I can't help but recommend buying a Switch 2 just for about anyone. Not only is the library super robust, but is starting to get a lot of those big, hard-hitting third-party titles. It's really only up from here. I am personally really excited for things that are coming out later in the Switch 2's life cycle. I pretty much purchased this console for Duskbloods and the Elden Ring port because I really, really want to play those games on the go. Those are fantastic titles, and I could have just bought a Steam Deck, but then I wouldn't have been able to play the Duskbloods. So that's where I kind of had that teeter-totter and rationalized the purchase with myself because, again, buying a Steam Deck was really something that I was interested in, especially at the time when I really didn't have a portable console anymore. I had lost my original Switch, so I was kind of switchless for a while. There's no Smash Bros. I was losing my mind, but that's besides the point. I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself, but I do think that brings up a bigger point of these IP not being on those other consoles and still having so much merit. So, again, when I see people say that not only does the Switch do not have any games, which, sure, I guess you could say that, but I'm just going to say PS5 has not had any games in the time span that this console's been out. But at that point, we're pointing the finger and not solving any issues. And I think that it's also time to just start being kinder to people that are enjoying their product. Obviously, we live in an age where everyone has an opinion now. Everyone's going to bring something down, and everyone, or not everyone is in a community is going to be happy about one specific product, and that is okay. But at the same time, why can't we come from a point of just understanding that, you know, not all things come to one system. Not all things, you know, are going to be peachy, and not all things are going to be fine out of the box. I still feel like there's a lot of room to improve with Switch 2. I think first and foremost, the prices do need to go down, at least somewhat. I don't think that's ever going to happen again because of the RAM shortage and just the general cost in way that the economy is set right now. But that's just the way that I'm kind of rationalizing some of the Switch 2 discussion. And I hate to be negative and throw specific folks under the bus, but I think that these Nintendo tubers have such an important job, maybe not to necessarily blindly ridicule or glaze the Switch 2, but talk about it from a very constructive point of view. Although these YouTubers don't have a lot of say-so in the way that the company will move forward with a lot of these ideas, they still have the responsibility, I think, to set the standard for their community to discuss this type of thing. I feel like, especially going on Twitter now as a platform, is just blind hate. I feel like I can't open up a comment section without seeing someone just say something needlessly rude about this console and the people that buy it. And obviously, I know it is Twitter, It's never going to be a positive space. But I point back to Matthew's GameCube video, which is discussing these broader issues in more depth. I look at his comment section, which is very, very constructive, and he prefaces in his video that he does not want any hate going to these Nintendo tubers, and I suppose I don't either, unless they are just straight up Nintendo doomers. I don't want to point out the name because I don't even want to give them a platform, but I'm sure you guys all know of that Dean guy, which it just some of the just worst slop on YouTube. Every other video is just the Switch 2 is going downhill. The sales are going down. This is a terrible product. Don't buy it. But there's so many things to do on Switch 2. If you have a Switch 1 and you don't see the worth, or you don't see the value in upgrading, you really don't need to. And that is something that I think Nintendo is honestly done a really good job at, which is continuing the life cycle of the original Switch within this current life cycle of the Switch 2. Obviously, they did say that they would just go ahead and still support the Switch 1 for quite a long time, which I was honestly a little skeptical of at first. Nintendo has been very vocal about supporting their older systems and then only going for about a year and a half, maybe even less than that. My mind immediately associates the Game Boy Advanced and then the DS lines when those initially started coming out. They were very vocal about the DS line not replacing Game Boy, and then DS outsold Game Boy, and they completely said fuck it and just no longer supported Game Boy Advanced. Although they did have games that still came out for it once the DS had come out, that seemed to have dried up really quick. And I think that's what's still so shocking about Switch 1 is that it's still getting supported really, really well. Obviously, things could always be better. Performance is still always going to be an issue because it is a piece of hardware from 2017, for God's sake. But I think that's just that's really just like ash on an already set volcano. We've known about this thing. We've known about the performance issues of the Switch 1 for a very long time. But at the same time, the fact that Nintendo is still going out of their way to push products out onto Switch 1 and Switch 2 with better performance on the newer hardware is very pro-consumer. But then again, their subscription model, which I haven't always necessarily agreed with. I'm not in a family plan anymore, but I have been previously where we split the cost, so it's never been too egregious. But even now, I think spending $50 on a year package that really gives you so much more functionality to the Switch is a relatively fair price. Obviously, with the Switch 2, you do also get access to the GameCube library, which is really robust now at this point, although we're still missing a couple titles that have been announced. The library is still quite large now at this point. Again, not even a full year into this console's life cycle, which I mention all the time with my friend Voyan38, that just games aren't coming out as frequently as I would hope. But I think that's more so a Nintendo thing than maybe a console thing. We know how they, or rather, we don't know how they operate. They've always been a very secret company, and I feel like us expecting things is almost lack of remorse with this specific console, and especially now with the way that we've been getting game releases, game announcements, and the lack of directs. I understand, I suppose, to a degree, where these Nintendo tubers are coming, where they say they have nothing to talk about on Switch 2, but at the same time, these Nintendo tubers have access to a gigantic library of already existing Switch 1 games, still ever coming out Switch 1 games, might I add. I failed to mention that. They are still coming out actively, and it's just blind hate. And I'm so tired of seeing the discourse around this console being whether or not it's worth it, and instead of whether or not it's actually good. The Switch 2 is a fantastic product, and I've been loving using it every day. And again, I fully expect to be called a bootlegger for enjoying something that I not only have a lot of time in, but genuinely just enjoy spending time on. It's now become my most used platform, more than my computer for that matter. And anytime I stream, I'm streaming a Switch 2 game, just because not only do I think that what is on the console, in my personal opinion, is very appealing, and if it's not for you, that's okay. But going around and making fun of people for purchasing this console, I think it's ridiculous. Uh, I feel like not other consoles get the same treatment. Obviously, PS5 is the de facto console. That's where a lot of people game on, so it's not going to be looked down upon. I feel like there's always been a double standard with Nintendo fans, and enjoying their consoles in specific is just being seen as lesser. I mean, I remember taking my 3DS to school and being made fun of, but I didn't really care because I was having fun on my 3DS, and I was able to play Pokemon with my friends and trade. So on top of it being a very personal thing, I think it's a very social thing. And I think that the rhetoric around Switch and around Nintendo just needs to be generally more positive. There's far too much negativity already in other spaces, not even just on Twitter, but on YouTube. If you guys can't tell from just the slop fest that is, look up Switch 2 and then see the first couple videos that come up. It's so demoralizing. It's very sad. But I don't know. I just felt the need to get my blind thoughts out there. Obviously, I'm not expecting to make a lot of waves with the live commentary like I have previously. These never really typically touch a lot of folks, but I just felt the need to come on here and yap at least a little bit. Please, I'll go ahead and link the video that I was mentioning down below, because I think it's a very important video to watch, especially if you are willing to think critically, if you are willing to go ahead and hear out someone's opinion that has an actual brain. Anytime I stumble across a YouTube video that has an actual formulated thought, I am very quick to share it with my internal group of friends, because there is not a lot of very well thought out videos on YouTube anymore, and it's very sad. And I think that the just general discourse around things we enjoy need to be positive. They need to be positive, because we can't let people that are bringing down other people's joy overshadow the things that are positive about, not even just this console in specific, but I think with any piece of media, any piece of I guess just really anything that you enjoy. If you have a Switch 2, I'd love to hear, what you play on it. I'd love to hear the most time you have sunk into one specific game, because I think it's so diverse for everyone. It's ever constantly changing, and I think that that's a great thing. I know friends that have 150 hours in Pokopia in a matter of 2 weeks in the time frame that it come out. I'm not that type of person, but I'm not going to belittle that person for enjoying Pokopia. I think it's the same discussion I had with Expedition 33 in my Mario Kart video. It's shame on me for telling my friends that it's a bad game, because I've never played it, and I've recognized the hypocrisy in even my own statements, that even I've had to come back and realize that not all games are made for me, not all systems are made for me, and if I'm not a pro consumer of that specific product, I will not go out of my way to needlessly just belittle it or talk shit for really no reason. Especially for the folks that don't own a Switch 2 or have never used one, that are making baseless claims that it's just a bad product. I just don't agree. I can't get onto the same boat. And maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I'm just a blind bootlicker for liking a Nintendo product. And for that, I'm sorry. But those were really all my thoughts. Again, if you have a Switch 2, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what games are you playing, because it's such a diverse library. You could really play any type of game that you want. And I think that that's a great thing. Before I wrap up, shout out Ball Pit. Go play Ball Pit. Runs great on Switch 2. Runs great on Switch 1. That's all I have to say. Thanks for hearing me yap for 20 minutes. I I will probably be live on Twitch in the coming days. Follow me on Twitch. Thanks so much. You have a great day.